Okay, so we're COMP2068, and this is week 5, lesson 5, part 1. And we're talking about this new assignment I'm giving you. It's assignment 2, the slot machine, and it's due class 7. So we're sitting in week 5, it'll be due class, or in and around class 7, it'll be on the Friday again. See, we're sitting at Thursday, so I want to see it on the Thursday, even though it's due the Friday. Right? Time yourself, so it's due the Thursday, or so I can see it the Thursday. Let's take a look at it together. Worst case scenario, because I want to, so Friday you're good to go. I don't want any questions last minute about the assignment on Friday and say, Tom, I'm having a problem, it doesn't work. Can you help me with my code on Friday? It's not going to happen. So a couple weeks out, it's the Friday before the break, so that'll be the Friday of in the same week as Family Day that it's due, right? So you'll have the Monday off with your family, and then the rest of the week is kind of, roister. Okay, so you're going to make a slot machine. That's what this whole thing is. You're going to use your knowledge of JavaScript and web technologies, whatever it is. And I'm going to give you the slot machine code, which I'm going to go over a bit from GitHub. And you're going to use the web API of your choice. I'm not going to tell you to use Create.js. I think it's the way to go, however. But if you really intend on using Phaser, you're okay with, I'm okay with that too. I'm not going to force you ever to use a web API. I'm just not going to show you the other ones because I have no time, not because I don't like them. I think they're actually quite cool. So let's talk about this thing. What is this slot machine supposed to look like? Well, it's going to look like one of these. So you're actually going to do a couple things. You're going to create the background image, right? Or you can grab it from the web. First of all, let's look at the code that I'm going to give you, because you're going to get some code off the cuff. You're not going to start with 0, right? Because that's just not fair. So I'm just going to go into, let's take a look at my GitHub. And it's actually on GitHub where I'm going to kind of give you this. So if you go to my GitHub link there, and if you go to repositories, and you kind of find a repository, you go slot machine. There's 2 of them, all right? There's a slot machine final, which is the solution set that I would ask you, this is my solution set, right? So I don't want your solution set to look like mine, right? It's there, right? And in fact, what I'll do right now is I'll go in there just for the, for the thing, just to make sure that you guys do your own. I'll just get rid of it, and I'll put up another one later. I want you to use the one that's part of, there's no solution set on it at all, right? So if you go to repositories and search for slot machine, there it is, right? It's right here, and it gives you kind of a basic project that you can use to start off with. Right? Now you don't have to use this project. You don't have to call it slot machine. You could just use some of the code from the project to get you going. So let's take a look at what this thing does. It does very little right now. Okay? So imagine you're given a task. Someone gives you a command line based slot machine, like I'm going to show you, and yet they tell you, I want this slot machine to kind of be, I want you to convert this into a graphical version of the slot machine. Okay? So this is where it is, and this is what it would look like. I'm just going to see if I can pull up the original one. Here it is. Now I've got several versions. If you notice, I got like version 2, version 3, version 4. Why? Because mine is a little bit. I had to work on it to make sure that as I progressed, I could show you the different versions of my slot machine week over week, right? Okay, so let's take a look and see what this does. If I run the code that I've given you, it does this. You have a slot machine. This is what you get, right? My jackpot is 500. My player money is 1,000, right? I've got a turn 0, wins 0, losses 0, and my win ratio is 0%. You put your bet here, and you click spin, and it gives you blank bar grapes. Okay, so it gives you the words. So the actual slot machine logic that I've given you actually generates your results. I mean, you can get this from any website on the net. That's why it's not important. The logic behind how the stuff works, how it selects bars or grapes or blanks or whatever, right? That's not so important right now. The importance is how do I implement this in a graphic user interface, right? Who has never seen a slot machine in their life? You guys never played? I know some of our partners from afar, right? Maybe have you ever used a slot machine? Yes, yes. You guys know what they are? Please, if you don't know what it is, we have to talk about it now because, yeah, it's kind of a one-armed bandit, right? And but there's different ones, digital ones with buttons, right? So most of them now, most people when they go to play the slots, they use the buttons, right? They don't use the handle so often, unless you're just a traditionalist, right? And you just want to feel the handles, kind of, you know. But at the end of the day, most of these games that you go to in casinos, right? They're all digital anyway. They've got a computer inside, right? The original slot machine had these reels, right? Like actually physical wheels that would turn, right? And they would tumble down and they would land in a certain order. And if you got all the symbols the same, it's the original one, then you get some money. So this is what we're trying to build here. Let me roll this again. I'm going to spin. I've got like my jackpot's 5,010. Let me just kind of pull this in a little bit so you can see it a little bit more clearly. I'm going to kind of make it. I'm going to shrink it down, put it in the middle of the screen. So my jackpot's 510. My player money, I started off at 1,000, is 990. I did one turn. I have one loss. Some statistics for debugging purposes only, right? And when I spin, so I'm going to spin, 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 spin. I keep on spinning. I can spin many, many times, and it can show me my wins and losses. Right? So, for example, I've won 4 times. I've lost 24 times. It's 28 turns I've taken. My money's down to 820. If I, put more money as a bet, right? I can spin, 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 and my money's going to go down a lot faster because that's how it works with slot machines. You just lose money faster if you bet more, right? And then eventually, I'm going to run out of money. Oh, I won some money there. I'm going to get to the point where, and if you notice, this is the result. So if I get a blank, anytime I get a blank, I lose. Doesn't matter, right? That's the logic. Blank, blank, blank. That's a good example of how I lost completely. Okay, I lost all my money. It says you don't have enough money to place the bet. What do? I only have 20 bucks. That's all I can bet. Let's bet it all, man. Let's bet it all, right? Spin it. Now I have 0 money. If I click spin again, it says, hey, you ran out of money. Do you want to play again? So the logic for what you need to do to reset and everything else here is set. It's ready to go, kind of thing. What you got to consider when you look at the logic is let's take a look at what's here in the solution, right? So all it comes with right now, this basic solution I'm giving you, is a very simple index.html file, right, with nothing really in it, with no styling, because really it's not about traditional styling with HTML5 and CSS, right? There he is. It's not about that. What you're getting here with this slot machine, right, is just the basic, I don't know, if you want to talk about basic structure to throw out your logic. On the JavaScript side, so if I go to the JavaScript side, here's my JS, and if you notice, it's all in JS. We're not using TypeScript here, right? And the JavaScript here is very simple. I've got a bunch of variables, player money, and so on. I got my tally variables that I'm using to keep track of my tally, and so on. And then I've got this show player statistics function that I'm going to call. It's all function-based. There's no classes here whatsoever. So the code I've given you should be fairly straightforward to understand. Let me just stop debugging here so you can see it better. So I've got a bunch of functions. I've got one of the functions is the show player stats function, right? Which gives you like the jackpot and blah blah. I'm using jQuery to punch out those values, right? But it doesn't really matter. And then I've got this reset fruit tally, which basically resets all my variables to 0. Now this is brute force way to kind of get this assignment done. This is what you're getting, right? Here's my reset all. It resets everything back to if I want to start playing again, all my values get reset. I've got my check jackpot to see if I've won the jackpot, because you know what? When I win, I've given myself a % chance, a small % chance, like 1 in 450 or something like that, to win the jackpot, right? And the jackpot starts off at like 5,000 bucks, so I can win the jackpot, or 10,000 or whatever it is. I have this show message function, and the show message function, what it does is it kind of says, hey, here's my winnings, my player winnings or losses, if you will. This is the show win message. I got a show loss message. So there's a bunch of functions here. And I've also got this check range function. What it does is helps me decide if my whatever value falls within a range of bounds. So I go, here's my lower bounds, here's my upper bounds. Instead of me doing if, else, I can use a method to do that, and that's what I've done here. And then here's the meat and bones of everything, right? This is where I actually have a bet line that has, it's an array of strings, and I have something called an outcome. The outcome right now is, there's no winnings here right now. And what I do is, as I go through this, my function, right, I have a for loop that checks. I have a switch statement, and it checks to see if my outcome, right, is within range. So if I roll my outcome, and my outcome is right here as an example, if my outcome is within a range between 1 and 27, right, as an example, then it's a blank. So I make a random number. I kind of generate a random number, and what I'm doing is I'm saying my random number is between 1 and 27. I generate a blank, and I put it in its place in the bet line, right? If it's between 28 and 37, it's grapes and so on. And if you notice, the hardest one to get is a 7, which is kind of like a 1.5% chance, right, to get a 7. So if you get a bunch of 7s, you're a lucky kind of guy, right? So that's kind of the basics of it. There's quite a bit of code here. The other one is determine winnings, which is basically, okay, now that I've won, well, if there's no blanks, I check to see if there's no blanks, so I know that I've won. If there's a blank, I can't win, right? If there's no blanks, then if I got 3 grapes, I get my player bet, whatever it is, times 10, and so on. If I get like, if I use a sevens, a couple of 7s, I get my player bet times 20, right? Because 7s are lucky to win, right? And so on. And at the end of the day, what I have is I have something called there's the event handler right here for my spin button. So when I click the spin button, the event handler fires, right? And I'm able to kick off all the other functions. This is like my main function. This is where everything kicks off. So from this event handler, from my spin button, everything else kicks off, right? Again, the result is something that looks like this. When I run it, right, it's just this thing. So I just kind of calculate, make some, I kind of spin the slot machine. You signed this already? And when the slot machine spins, it just generates your results. But this isn't what I want. This is what I've given you, right? What I want back is a graphic user representation, right? A user interface that represents this, right? Let's go back to the assignment for a second. So again, that's the code, right, in a nutshell. You're going to add 3 images to the GUI, 1 for each reel. Okay, so think about in the middle of a slot machine, instead of us representing it the way we're doing it right now, this is some examples of slot machine graphics that I kind of took from the web, right? So this is kind of a couple of reels, reel 1, reel 2, and reel 3. Again, it's just 3 reels, right? Some of them have more, right? If you go to the casinos, they have 5 reels, 6 reels, whatever, right? But all I care for, just to complete the requirements for the assignment, is 3 reels, right? Reel 1, 2, and 3. And this is where your slot machine graphics are going to appear for the fruits. So you're going to replace the name of the fruit that I'm giving you, banana, cherry, whatever. And by the way, you can use your own. If you want to not use my names, like banana, cherry, and you want to do like Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, and Yoda, right? I'm just saying, if you want, you can make your slot machine look however you want. I'm giving you the flexibility to make any theme you want, right? So you don't have to use cherries and bananas. You can use whatever you want. The challenge is it's got to be programmed in JavaScript and HTML5. You can't use any kind of extra something to program it like Unity or something else, right? So you got to use your tools that we've been talking about. You can choose an API like Create.js or Phaser or some kind of other game API that you can download and install for free. That's the stipulations, right? But again, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be creating this UI version of the slot machine. So again, you've got these 3. The 3 images are going to appear in the reels, right? You're going to have a spin button, like we showed you before. The spin button is going to basically control your UI. When you click the spin button, it's going to check that the user has enough money, right? And if he does, he has to have made a bet as well. And if he has made a bet and he's got enough money to make the bet, then it can spin. Otherwise, it should be grayed out. Okay, you shouldn't allow to spin the button, right, or press the button. there's going to be a button to control the UI to reset the game. How do I reset the game? If I press the reset button, it just resets all my values and everything changes back to what it was. I'm also going to have a button that allows the user to quit the game. But can you really quit a page with HTML5? Can you say quit and close the whole browser down? Is that possible? Sometimes it is for some browsers, and sometimes it won't. So what I'm going to ask you is, instead of quitting the whole program, because sometimes it won't allow you to, just redirect them somewhere else, another page that says you've lost, or thank you for playing. All right? That's good enough. You don't have to actually close the browser. Closing the browser would be preferable. If you could just close the browser down, like shut the whole thing down, that'd be great. But redirecting is fine as well for this one. A bunch of labels. Let's say add labels or other appropriate controls. I'm not going to tell you what to add exactly, but add some labels that display the user's money, the jackpot, and the current bet. You need to have those things. And ensure that when the user enters a bet amount in the bet entry control, that the program checks, validates if he has enough money. Because if he doesn't have enough money, he can't bet that money, right? Include conditions that allow the player to potentially win the jackpot. And again, you can use the example code, right, for your odds. And then reflect the jackpot win by displaying a special message. Hey, you won the jackpot, or something like that, right? The slot machine graphic has to be in the background. So if you just like draw your slot machine, that's not cool, man. I want it to look like a slot machine. Unless you can really, you're an awesome artist, right? I'm just saying, unless you're an awesome artist, right? Then my recommendation is you grab a slot machine graphic that's on the web, which is what I did, modify it so it's your own, right? And add it into the back end. Okay, so that's a piece of it. That's the whole functionality piece. Then, of course, your internal documentation you're going to get 8 marks for, which we kind of talked about on the previous assignment number 1, about internal documentation. And your external documentation is similar to what we did with assignment number 1. It's pretty heavily weighted. So 8 and 12, so 20 marks for internal and external documentation still. 4 marks for GitHub, so it's 24 marks. And the whole assignment, in terms of little marks, little points, if you will, is 56. It's almost half for documentation. Why? Because I know that if I don't give you this chance to get a few marks in documentation, some of you won't be able to do this assignment. You won't pass. This is a real game you're making for the first time, right? So I'm giving you a chance to do this. And at the same time, I want you to use your planning and your wireframing and all that stuff we talked about for assignment number 1. I want you to use those skills that you kind of built up over that assignment to kind of put together your documentation. No, you cannot. Right? But it'll be close, right? If you did everything perfect. But how can you do a perfect documentation if you have no functionality? So, you can get some marks, definitely. You may not pass. But the documentation helps you. How about some bonus marks? So I always give an opportunity for bonus marks. And if you look down here, I'll give some examples. I didn't ask for any sound effects right now. So I say, if you add sound effects, sound clips, and a spin, when the spin button is pressed, that's some bonus marks. So I'm going to leave sound effects to you. Because right now we haven't really covered how to do sound or whatever. So if you want to explore that on your own, and you want to add some really cool sound effects, all the power. Some kind of animation effect for the reels. Right now, all I said is make the images just appear. I didn't say animate the images to spin, right? And the other one is include additional bet lines. So instead of one bet line, what is a bet line anyway? Do you guys know what it means? Well, if you look at the graphic, right? There's a bet line that goes across the 3 reels, right? And this, across the 3 reels, this bet line, as an example, is the only way you can win. If all 3 fruits or all 3 symbols, I don't know, Jedi, Sith Lord, and whatever, Rebel, if they're all the same, But some slot machines have multiple bet lines where they do diagonals, and they have more than one line that you look at. And if you actually look online and see example slot machines with multiple bet lines, there are several examples there that you can get ideas from. Okay. This game's got to be live, all right? So this game is not something that you're going to put up, that you're going to hand to me on GitHub and say, I'm done. It's got to be on your live site. So wherever your other game was right now, as an example, your dragon game, or the equivalent that you made for your dragon game, it's the same place that you're going to put up. Maybe you're going to create another link for your new game. Maybe you're going to replace your dragon game with this one. Whatever you want to do, but at the end of the day, and give me a few, before you replace it, please let me know, because eventually I'll have it marked, so I can look at it live, right? If you replace it, I'm like, hey, where's the dragon game? It's gone. So give me a little bit of time to do that, and you'll have 2 weeks to put it up, right? So try not to put it live until the 2 week, in that range. Give me a couple weeks to get everything done and get caught up.
It's June 2 weeks.
2 weeks, February 20th, right? So that's a couple of options for this, right? Okay, let's talk about this a little bit more, and I'll give you an example of my work that I kind of put together for last semester. Because again, when I challenge you guys to do this, I try and challenge myself, right? Because that's not fair. So this is what you get. This is what we started with. And over the weeks, what I did was I progressed to add additional functionality. So let's go into my version 2. So this is my version 2 of the game. Okay, so what you saw was what we all started off with. And this is what I did next, right? And I'll talk about the code a little bit too, right? Okay, so here's my slot machine. This is version 2. Okay. So I got a graphic. I modified it from the one I found on the web. It's got a bit of sound, right, and all that kind of stuff. So I wanted to get some bonus marks if I was marking myself. I have no credit, so if you notice as I hover over it right now, it doesn't allow me to spin, right? If I click the bet button, because right now I have my total credits are 1,000, right? If I click the bet button, I get a bit of a sound, right? And then I click the spin button, now it's available to spin, right? And then it comes up, right? That's my first version. Right? And as I've timed it so that when I do the sound, that's when the images show up. Because sometimes if you just click the button, and if you can put a timer in there, they just show up right away, right? Well, there's a couple of blanks and the orange, right? The orange stuff. So let me keep going. There's a win, right? There's another one. I'm lucky, man. A cherry. I've got my reset button if I want to reset for whatever reason, right? And if I lose, let's say a bit big, like 500, right? And I'm going to do a couple of slots. I want to try and lose for you, right? It won't be long. Okay, I lost. Now I'm going to try and spin. I can't spin, right? I ran out of money, right? So I have to run out. Do you want to reset? Do you want to play again? I say, okay, it resets. I can also shut the game down by pressing the power button, right? And it'll actually turn my browser off, right? Which is what I want you guys to do, right? So that's my version 2, right? That's my version 2. Version 1 was the one you have on the web. Version 2 is this one. Version 3 was, I did some optimizations for version 3, right? So here's my optimizations for version 3. It almost looks identical, right? But the code has been optimized a little bit. And that's all it is. And if I was to look at the code, if you notice I got some sounds in here as well, the buzzer inside my code. I'm using JavaScript here. But I've switched from JavaScript to TypeScript, right? So I'm not just using JavaScript anymore. I've got all my Easel.js libraries inside the lib folder with my typings and everything else, right? So I've kind of switched over to that. My index.html page is very simple. Again, I just use a canvas, and I import all my libraries, right? And I also have a constants, a special constants module that I put in. I will talk about modules as we go on, right? So a couple of libraries there, and then my game.js file, my final game file, which is where I have everything, and it's kind of broken out nicely. So if I actually look at my game.ts file here, and here you can actually see how it cross-compiles from TypeScript to JavaScript. I've got quite a bit of code, right? Like we're talking about total code for this project for me. I'm going to tell you right now is 626 lines, right? Okay, that sounds like a lot, but you already get a lot. Right? So it's not like you start with 0. You start off with code, right? And it sounds like a lot of lines, but really it's not. Now you get 2 weeks. Don't wait to start this thing. This will bite you in the ass, this thing, right? This will come at you harder than the dragon came at you, right? Because the dragon has this, your documentation. You didn't know really what I was looking for there. Some people did a pretty good job. Some people did a crappy job. I've seen some of the stuff, right? This will bite you, all right, if you don't start right away. You got to start programming and looking for graphics and all that kind of stuff right away. Don't wait, okay? So let's take a look at this thing. So I did all these extra functions here, and really, when you look at the actual game itself, if I was to run it, it's going to be very similar to what I had before, right? If you notice, it resizes for my screen. If I click it, and I spin, looks the same. On the outside, it looks identical. On the inside, I've rewired the back end so that it uses, a little bit better functionality, right? I've optimized it a little bit. Okay, that's what it does. So you can't really see what I've done in version 3. And that's what's going to happen to you. You're going to come up with a version 3, and you're going to go, it looks identical to version 2 on the outside. But on the inside, efficiency-wise, it works better. Okay. Finally, within a couple of weeks, and again, this is just as much work as you guys did, because I start with the same time frame as you when I do it, right? I came out with version 4. So this is my final. I could have taken it further. I just didn't have time, because I only have 2 weeks, right? Again, I'm using TypeScript from my libraries, but now when I run it, it looks a little different. So I've got the same outside, right? But when I bet, and I spin, right? Actually, hold on a sec. Hold on. Oh, no. Oh, yeah, thank you very much. I didn't refresh. Take a look how there's a bunch of stuff that's half off the screen. Why? Well, because I want to do this. Okay? That's what I took it to, because I wanted to do animated reels. Because I said, hey, this is kind of cool. And I did a whole new calculation on how the animated reels would work compared to just the images flashing up on the screen. Oh yeah, I've done that before. So if I run it again, let's say a little bit more. We can talk about strategy on how this was done. But really what I did was I created a matrix of graphic images that I took off screen, right? And I would roll them in. I had a bunch of them. I had basically a good nine rows off screen, because it spins so fast. They all come on screen, right? And I didn't care about the ones that were just off screen. I only cared about the last set, because those are the ones I'm going to judge to see if it landed well, right? So there's a bit of different logic that I used for this one. I had to modify my logic from where I started off quite considerably to get to this place, because when I first built my game, I didn't build it for animation, right? Now, again, if you think with animation with the kind of the end in mind, then it becomes more of a good-looking game. Still, there's lots of things we can do here. I can certainly put different sounds. I can change my graphic. I could add some flashing lights, things that I just didn't get around to do, right? Because I didn't have time. And so there's a bit of you're going to go through this almost like an evolution in your game, but start small. You start by handling the stuff that you need to handle to make your requirements. Meet your requirements. Again, when it comes to game making, actually, it comes to application creation, you can really rut yourself into a black hole, okay? Don't do this, because you only have 2 weeks. So limit yourself to, okay, whatever I can get done in 2 weeks, I'm going to hit my requirements, and that's it. Anything else, if I'm faster than 2 weeks and I can get it done within a week, great. Now I'm going to add functionality, which is what I did. I kind of finished my whole project within a week or a few days, right? And then after I got it done, okay, now I added functionality. And it took me hours. I probably spent, no joke of a lie, probably over a 2-week period, 30 hours. Because that's what I wanted to do. Do you need to spend 30 hours in this thing? No, probably 10 or 12 will suffice, right, for this one. Okay, and that means 10, 12, you debugging, putting things together, pulling graphics together, taking care of your internal documentation or external documentation. This is not something you can knock off in a day. It will not happen properly. You will not get full marks. You cannot do it. Do not start on the Thursday that we meet next week, the 2 weeks from now, and expect to be done on the Friday evening. It's not going to happen, right? You guys can't do this. So start now. Start early. This is a good project for you to test your skills, right? To get your graphics in place and get familiar with the Create.js framework or API. I did, yeah, but you don't have to. I just use jQuery just to pump stuff out. You don't need to use jQuery. I use jQuery for the first example code that I put up on GitHub, but it's only just to create some kind of. It's almost like a console application is what I created in the first thing. I just used a very basic, no styling. Just content that it spits out for you with logic in the back end. That's what you get, right? That's what you inherit from me. And the rest is what you're going to create here, right?
Today, after class, when I'm free, can you show me how to use GitHub as a server, like putting a link on it?
Yeah, sure. We can talk about that. Didn't I cover that with you guys last time? Okay, we'll talk about that again. Okay, so that's one thing. I do want to talk to you about a couple of other things. Let me stop debugging here, and let me go into this thing. Now, one thing that Visual Studio has when it comes to asset management, if you notice, I've organized things into nice little places now. Assets, I got my CSS, I've got my JavaScript. Now, I could have called this scripts as an example, and I've got a couple other things in there. I'm using the Foundation framework just to center things. and make it responsive so it can work on multiple devices. Like this, my game will work on mobile as well. That's one thing I did want it to do. Yeah. But instead of me going with everything and the sound, there's a bit of tricks to make the sound work, or else it won't work properly with mobile. CreateJS has some tricks you have to use. But anyways, at the end of the day, if you notice my code, I've broken up my code in different modules now. I have assets, I have an asset manager, I have objects that I've broken up my bet button. I created different classes and stuff like this that I use. So this is where I progressed to. I didn't start off with classes and objects. I started very procedurally, right? Just like you're given procedural code with functions, right? Then I went to classes because for me, classes was more powerful and I needed to use those things. Otherwise, my code would have been crazy long, right? So I've got like, when you look at my index.html for this one, my final project, and you look at the amount of classes I have, here's my framework, right? Here's a couple of JavaScript helper libraries that I use, jQuery and Foundation, just to center things and make it responsive. And then on the bottom, this is all my game code, right? So multiple modules and everything else. I'll show you how to do all this, right, over the course of the next few weeks, right? But you may not have all these piece parts by the time you're ready to go, and it's okay. I'm showing off with you guys. I'm saying, hey, I'm a professor. I got to make sure I put it all out there for you. So when I give you my solution set, you can look at it, and for future projects, you have some code that works and everything else, and kind of a this is how it works out. If you put your time into it. A couple things though that, like I said, that Visual Studio does for you is when you look at images. And I have a background image for my slot machine. So if I look at my slot machine background image and I double click inside my images here in my assets, I actually have my slot machine graphic, and it shows you just the graphic itself. So this is what my graphic would look like. And if you notice, I've cut out this piece. I've actually created this piece because this graphic didn't come to me like this. I took the graphic, I took it into a graphics program, and I deleted sections of it so I could put it in my own stuff. Like, for example, my reels are very generic. And if you notice, there's a bit of a glitch here, right? And all I do is cover those things up with a kind of a white square from my blanks. So my blanks come off. You won't see this little glitch, as an example, when I'm generating my my graphic as it comes up, because I cover it with a square, it's just a square box. That's all it is. A square rectangle, or a square. White square. Boom, boom, boom. And then so you don't see this graphic. And then inside this area here, this is where I put my my slots is where I put my, kind of say, here's my jackpot. Down here's my total credits, how much money I have. Here's my current bet. And over here is where I'm going to put my winner paid. So I've almost outlined my interface just by doing my background graphic, which I recommend. If you're going to, for strategies for how to start, I would start off by saying, how do I want my graphic to look? Where do I want to plop in my stuff? How do I make this go? And I use the CreateJS API because I can control, I can do a pixel perfect, kind of interface. So I don't have to worry about, where things are going to appear. I make sure that they appear exactly where I want them to appear, right? That's one thing that I can do. The other things I did was, hey, I need to validate my input for my user. And I don't want my user putting in an A instead of a number, because you have to check that, right? Because if the guy puts some weird, and normally when we go to a slot machine in real life, we don't put in like the money, like 100, we don't do that, we just press a button. So I created buttons. So an example, I have all these bet buttons. So here's a bet button. This is the bet number 1. This is what it looks like really, really zoomed up, right? But the idea here is that you create your bet buttons. So here's bet 10, and they almost look identical. All I've done is change the actual image in here for what it would look like as an example. One of the things I had challenged with was, how do I put a reset button or a power button on this thing without wrecking my graphic? Because here's my graphic, and I want to put my power button up there, right? So I can't make it a transparent button because it looked like crap, right? So I kind of come up with, kind of a compromise. So I get a bit of the graphic on the outside with this power button that I downloaded from the internet, right? So this is not my own graphic, right? But if you notice in the background, you see a bit of a star, because this button will fit exactly over the place where this is going to be, right? So I want it to kind of fit over instead of using a transparent image, because sometimes when you use transparent images, unless you go pixel perfect and clean up all the edges, you're going to see this really weird halo, or it won't look right, right? So I wanted to integrate it with my background, and I had to position it perfectly in order for me to do that. It's just design decisions on my part. You can make it work different ways. Same thing with my reset button. If you notice, my reset button's got this blue background with a bit of this star that's up on top here. But at the end of the day, it's just the reset button that I would have taken from the internet. So I didn't do anything special with this. I did put reset in here instead of off or whatever, because I modified the original button. So there's a bit of graphic manipulation you're going to have to do for this, for your own. However, if you're really lazy and you don't want to do any of this stuff, you could theoretically download all the graphics from the web. The majority of them are out there. And you could just slap them together into an interface. It may not look right. You might lose a few marks, but it would work, right? I'm just saying. So it's, you know, I've tried to do it so it looks as good as possible with the time I had. So those are the kind of things that you want to think about when you put together your assets for your slot machine. So again, one is you need to get a background graphic, and two, you need to organize your assets in this images or some kind of images folder, right? Now, at the end of the day, I ended up using something called an asset manager, which for me worked out to be a static class, where I almost like a container class that I stored all my graphics in. Okay, we're not going to get there right away, but at the end of the day, the solution I will show you as we go over the next 2 weeks. I will show you how to do these things, how to create, you know, an asset manager, how to increase, how to use modules for your code, because when we modularize our code, it becomes easier for us to handle. Like if you notice now, if I go to my game.ts file, and if I go all the way to the bottom, remember I started off with 600 lines of code, right? Well, this has, in the main file here, about 500 lines of code, but I've split off my objects. I've got my bet button class. Here's my bet button class, which is 20 lines of code, and I've got my button class, which is another 26 lines of code, and I've got my game object class, which is another 15 lines of code, and so on. I'm going to explain to you how this all works, because I use inheritance here, right? So I extend or I modify an existing sprite object that comes with Create.js, and I extend it to create my own game object. Okay, we're going to talk about inheritance here. So everything you've learned, everything you're learning in Java or in other classes, it's very similar. We're going to use here, right? So the stuff you're learning is transferable. It's not something that I'm not going to hit on later on. Okay? So just as an aside, this is how I did it. Now, is this the only way that you could possibly do it? And is this perfect? Absolutely not. There's tons of different ways you can do it. I want you to come up with your own graphics. I want you to be creative in the way you download stuff and how you put things together. And just as an example is, if I was to go search out, you know, slot machine online. So if I said, you know, slot machine, and put it in on Google, and I go to images, right? Well, you know what? Guess what comes up? All the regular graphics that I've already shown you, right? Because this is where I took them from. Here's what I don't recommend. I don't recommend you take a graphic like this at an angle. This would be hard for you to kind of spin the wheels, all right? Or this. Try and make it so that the actual slot machine itself is kind of face on like this. I don't just want you to put this piece of the slot machine, because you still need to have some kind of labels and everything to show your bet amount, your jackpot, all that kind of stuff's got to be in different labels, right? That you're going to create. So this might be a starting point. You might be able to grab some real information and kind of go in here and clean this up, right? You can clean this up with a graphics program and take away some of the graphics that are in here to create your own, right? But at the end of the day, what you want to do is, this is where I took mine. Look at this one. This is almost exactly like mine, right? If you notice, right? Here's my jackpot, except I took this graphic, right? I downloaded it, and I took all these buttons out, and I put my own in, right? So this is almost exactly. And also, if you notice, see how this doesn't have a jackpot area up here? I took this little graphic down here. Let's go into that for a second so I can show you. This is the original one, all right? And by the way, I don't have 20 pence to play the, what's it called? It says 20p per play, right? I took that out. I don't need that. It's going to be dollars, and it's going to be over here, right? So I took the basic slot machine graphic, and I took away this glowing stuff, because this doesn't make any sense for me. And I took it and modified it. I cut out everything that was inside the reels as much as possible, right, with the graphic program. And I took this square that I have, where I have a label, and I took the same thing and put it up there. So I just copied and pasted up there. So the graphic, my end graphic, used the same kind of style as this whole slot machine background would use. So again, there's tons and tons of stuff out here, especially things like if I kind of put in, kind of go in and say bet buttons. If I want to see a bet button, what it would look like, I just kind of go into images, and there might be all kinds of little bet buttons that you could probably use. You can probably look up some stuff that makes sense, some things that would work, some things that make no sense, like You know, I could put numbered bet buttons or whatever, and there's some weird graphics you just want to avoid. But at the end of the day, you know, you could probably find a lot of stuff. If you search hard enough, you can find a lot of the stuff that I use here up online. Okay. Any questions around assignment 2? Right. So much bigger assignment from a weighting perspective. It's 15%, right? So it's weighted equally with your first assignment, right? So if you did, you know, your first assignment, you might think that's easy. This one's got the same weight, but it's a little more challenging. And after this one, we're going to do a side scroller where there's a lot more interactivity, right? So you need to understand how to put position graphics on the screen for this one in order for you to get to the next phase. So if you miss out, or if you don't do this one somehow, or if you can't do this piece, you're not going to do well in your side scroller. Because your side scroller is going to be one of the ones you can use for your final project. And we'll talk about your final project as we get closer. Okay? I'm going to try and give you the specs for your side scroller and your final project next week. I'm going to try and give you all the assignments as I can so you have an idea of what your load is going to be like so you can kind of plan your projects over the next week. Because this is more of a project-heavy class in terms of what we do. So there's no final exam. There's no final exam in this course for web design, for this web course. It's all projects, right? Yeah, but you might say that's great, right? But it's not great, guys. At the end of the day, it means lots of work, yeah. Right now, the midterm, I'm going to put a midterm together that's probably going to test your ability to manipulate Create.js and, you know, the Visual Studio environment, but it'll be like, again, fairly straightforward. It'll probably be worth like, I guess 15% or more, 20%. But the midterm is going to be more practical. There's no multiple choice on this midterm or anything like that. Was that? Oh yeah, I always make it open book, Matt. Right? It's not about, you know, as developers, I don't believe we shouldn't have access to our stuff. Right? The only thing that I would ask is when you're doing your midterm or when you're doing stuff like with any other class I do, no access to Google. Right? So if you have access to all my slides, you have access to your notes, you have access to your code, your own code on GitHub, my code on GitHub. You have access to those things, but I'm not going to give you access to Google to Google code and put it into and slap it into your exam. That I will not allow. All right, so just letting you know in advance. Okay, so if we're all done this one, I want to move on to the next piece. So are we sure we have no other questions? You guys should have tons of questions on this one. This is the first real assignment that you're getting that has some graphics behind it. Right? So think about this for a second because you know what? There's a couple things to do here. There's some assimilation, if you will, right? There's the logic piece, right? And then with the logic piece, which is separate, there's the GUI piece, the UI, right? So your UI piece is a whole separate issue here. How do I create my UI? How do I position my stuff on the screen? And we're going to do some of that today in class. I want to show you. We're going to start building our slot machine today together. All right, I'm not going to allow you to do it on your own from scratch. We're going to start building the graphic. So I want to grab a graphic randomly, and I'm going to take it and modify and use some tools in this next section, this part 2 of this video. We're going to take a graphic and create our slot machine background, and we're going to build out what it's going to look like for our logic. Okay? But the first place we start is going to be by do some graphic manipulation. So that's the next piece.